Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm glad to be back actually. It's been a while since I've done a show, especially glad to be back here at Simple. And I've actually had some good opportunities to give some talks in Detroit at the Pete Outoff Garden, Outoff Detroit, met with everybody there. The garden looks beautiful. They're taking tremendously good care of it. And that's going to be our discussion today. It's not just caring for what is, but caring and understanding the possibilities of what continue to be, what you can add and enhance, and doing it through who you are and what you believe you see into your future for the garden. And that's what our discussion is going to be. So I think we'll get this show started, and we'll continue with some more shows after this looking at garden enhancement. The next one I'm going to do is, I did a Messick prairie. You might want to look back on that one. We might be able to show it again. Designed a Messick prairie, I think last year. So we're going to look at now that it's a year old, how can we enhance it? What can we add to that Messick prairie? And that'll be our next show. So again, welcome back, and welcome to Simple, our studio, I should say. And so let's get into it. And I start with the two questions. Let me get everything's rolling here. Okay. And I call these two important questions. I think every show that I have in Simple, I start with two questions. And these are questions that don't have answers. They just have, they're thoughtful. How to be more thoughtful about how I am with what I do. So the first question is, Tina Turner, remember Tina Turner? It's what's love got to do with it? So what does love have to do with anything you're doing? Not just gardening, but all the things you enjoy or come to know that you didn't just have discovered or whatever. What does love have to do with it? And I think for me, that's a very important question, because it's not just that I want to be joyful about what I'm doing. I want to find love in the things I do, and what responses I get back from the people we work with, the gardens we create, and then how do people see it? We have those discussions with people about how they feel about the style of planting and how we can enhance it. So I think that's something to think about. And the second question, how do you feel about the phrase, that which is loved is beautiful, and that which is beautiful is loved? It's kind of it just seems to ring true when we say it, but yet it's how we find things in life. If you find something beautiful that moves you emotionally, you just tend to care about it. That's with your family, your children, a way of eating, a way of sharing activities within your community. There's something beautiful about the way your community is and continues to evolve where you live, and you love your community. And I think these two questions have a lot to do with how we garden and how we bring ourselves into the connection with the plants, and then how the plants respond by creating a healthy environment for us to live in and love. The next image you see is one of the gardens I've done and we take care of in Fontana. So what I constantly look at is the evolution of the garden from year to year. And if there's anything I can enhance it with. And sometimes there's nothing we do. We let the plants, you can see how densely they're planted. So by summer, there's very little weeding. We get that taken care of usually the month of May to early June. And then we just look at the combinations, how the plants are reacting to each other, sharing resources, like light resources. And this community is pretty stable. I have to say, we don't do much in here. The Calamaris, Amsonia, the Schizocarium, the Perovskia, the Echinacea, they've all reached stability. So there's not much that we do. We could enhance it. I could take out a few Echinacea and maybe put in some white cone flowers or some Echinacea pallida. So there's things we can enhance it with. And that could make it a little more entertaining or joyful for the people going by to see a few things change or be different. But at some point too, we don't need to do too much because the plants are living healthy and the combinations actually work well together for a long period of time. And this is a residential planting we did. And again, when I go here and visit, We try to visit them twice a year. I stop out spring and summer, or summer and fall, or spring and fall. Maybe I'll skip the summer depending on how the garden's looking and what we want to enhance or add. But I try to go once a year, and they welcome that because they can tell me what their thoughts are and how they see the garden changing because they live with it. But again, this garden's pretty stable. There's not much we do. Sometimes, again, there's opportunities for some shade plants now to go into the back where you see the echinacea and the galenia in towards the back. The galenia has that red fall color. But again, it's constant observation, not daily, but seasonally, to go in and see what possibilities are that we might be able to add something, or just say, you know what, things are going well. We like the way the garden's moving forward. So what is it we need to do? Like here, I just put this statement down. We need to burst the bubble we live in. So what do I mean by that? I mean, sometimes when you see plantings, they become very homogenized. You know, when you go from point A to point B to point C, you drive through the suburban Chicago or a suburban Detroit, suburban anywhere, you don't see much change in anything. You see the same turf, shrub, repetition of the same things. So if we can burst that bubble, which all of you out there I know you want to do, and you're doing it now very successfully, and you're doing it at a rate you were doing it better than you've done 2 to 3 years ago, because you're constantly bringing more knowledge and information to the way you plant. But the key to this whole thing, which I kind of wrote down for me, the key to this, is placing plants together is to practice, practice, practice. It's kind of like taking up the clarinet. You don't run and buy a clarinet, then a week later you're playing some jazz music at one of the local bars. You got to practice, practice, practice. And that's the same with planting. And it's ongoing all your life. You never stop unless you want to. When you run out of possibilities for your future, that'll probably mean it's time to stop because you can't really see any more directions to go. And then you have to question practice with patient observation. So to me, the key is always for me to just observe how things are moving. And it's not just plantings, it's observing the patterns of a sunrise, the patterns of a sunset, taking walks through the kettle moraine in different times of the year. And you just look at patterns being created by trees leafing out, ground layers changing season to season in nature. And we all have to keep updating our knowledge. And the key I continue to try to do is I have to redefine my beliefs. And that's through self-discovery. The more I can discover how something is happening or changing or being what it's becoming, I can bring that into how I garden or how I relate to people or how I change language to have discussions with people about the value of plants in their garden. And this practice, if you see on this slide, this is a class I teach where we come together as a team. We look at developing perennial plant communities. The team makes a list of plants that they want to use based on the conditions we talk about, the site conditions, soil and sunlight conditions and moisture. And then as a team, they lay out the plants in patterns and we assess what the outcome of their actions is. When you put that in, how are you going to have to care? What's the stewardship going to be for those plants as they grow into each other from youth to maturity? And that gives the student some idea, you know what, that's too complicated. I don't have the time to care for that. I've got too much of this or that, and I'm going to take out 50% of them and put something in that's much more cooperative and less time to take care of. And we're just doing it on a game board. I came up with this game board, and we just keep moving things around, asking and answering questions of how to, what if, and you never know. So that's part of it. And this is a growth rate chart I came up with, and I use this for various plants. But sometimes now I don't use this because after 42 years, I kind of know the growth rate and growth habit of most things I grow. And if new plants I introduce myself to, I have to come to know their growth rate and growth habit and their response to other plants I put them with within a community. So you see on this chart, this is Perovsky Little Spire. So the very first year in a 4.5-inch pot, it's about 6 inches wide and 6 inches tall when I plant in June. By October, it's about 8 inches wide at the base, and maybe it's about 12 inches tall. The second year in June, it's 8 inches wide and 8 inches tall, and it's almost 18 to 20 inches tall. And the third year in June, it's 8 to 12 inches wide, 10 to 12 inches tall. But basically, even before you put the plant in the ground, you can have this idea of how the plant's growing in a 3-year period and seeing how much space it takes up. And the beauty of this is, and this will be our exercise later, is you keep reviewing it, keep thinking about it as you're working in dead of winter. Like even right now, it's a beautiful day out, but yet I could sit inside tonight and I could draw up some grids and see how these plants are going to react with each other based on growth rate and growth habit, which is a good show to review too. I've talked about that 2 or 3 years ago. It might be good to revisit the discussion I've had with you about growth rate, growth habit plants from youth to maturity. So when you design a planting, are you aware of the progression of plant development that occurs between the young plants through time? That's very important. What will the outcome of your actions be if you are not somewhat aware of how plants have been placed and grow into each other from youth to maturity? So what do you think is going to happen if you really don't have any idea how these plants are going to grow into each other? It could be a mess. Or it could the garden could be totally dependent on you constantly being there, thinning plants and keeping plants from shading other plants out. Are you aware who is going to care for this planting? When you design a garden, you really need to know who you're handing the garden off to. What are their stewardship capabilities? What's their knowledge of the plants you're placing in that garden growing into each other? Are they aware of that? And then you work up to their capabilities and let their knowledge of planting grow into the planting as the planting matures. So it's a cooperative awareness. The plants are aware that this is the level of care they're going to get, and the gardener grows with the plants. As the plants are growing, his awareness of who they are grows with them. And you can see this is some of the designs I do. They're not simple things. You can see the complexity, and it's not that I want to be complex. I'm just looking at the plants moving together through a 3 to 5 to 10 year period, so I can understand the percentage of plants to put in and know by year 3 and by year 5 what my outcome is going to be and what inputs I need to manage that style of planting. And someone out there saying, "Oh, geez, Roy, that's way too hard. I don't want to think about that. Ken, is there an easier way?" There is an easier way. Find somebody who knows how to do this, hire them to do it for you. That's the easiest way to do it. Nothing's easy if you want to be successful at it. And I'm by no means successful. I'm still a constant intern. I might have said this on another show, by the time I hit 92, I got 22 more years left. I'll become 92. I think by then I might be unstoppable. It's like, buckle up, here I come. I'm really gonna know how to put a garden in. But it's not that complex if you go after it and understand it, because the more you come to know, the more awareness you have of how all this is fitting together without really doing that much thinking. You're reacting and then thinking and then reacting to your own design. So this is a young planting. You can see the relationships that will be started in here. And when I look at this young planting, I can see the cecilarias, how they're going to mingle with the calaminthas. I can follow my way through this young planting and see where I possibly made some mistakes laying plants out, but I don't really have to correct it for 3 to 5 years. But even in the young planting, I'm aware of it, or I could make changes right now. I could go dig 10 or 12 plants out, move them over, and bring 10 or 12 plants in to correct what I wasn't aware of at the time I did it. And again, the key is young plantings mingling with old plantings. This is an established garden you see on the right-hand side of this image. And we added 2 more gardens. And we added those gardens not because she won the lottery and had more money to put them in. We put those gardens in because the person that was taking care of it knew how to take care of that, wasn't struggling with gardening, but was gardening joyfully. And she said, "You know, Roy, can you put in these 2 gardens? I know I'm capable of caring for it because I've done a good job and I really enjoyed what I was doing here." And these 2 gardens we put in, that's another 2,000 square feet. She might say, I'm fine now. I can do this, I can take care of this, and it's time to move on. And then she can joyfully be gardening. But she had to learn how to step into that situation. So it's all about what? It's all about workability. And what is workability? Workability is the condition and performance of our actions. So again, when you're designing something, you want to create a design that has workability. You don't want to put a garden in that's going to be the best it's ever going to look the day it goes in and say, oh, 5 years from now we got to replace this mess. That's not workability. Workability is knowing year after year after year, at least having an awareness of how the garden's going to progress and how the plants will mature and grow into each other, and then working with the people that will care for it so you can create a team and they can understand what your goals and objectives were for the garden. And then with them, you're showing them some practices they might not be aware of so how they can take care of the garden at a much lower level of input and let the plants become more responsible for their own well-being, because that's how you created the planting initially. And this was a garden that we took over, I put in 2004, and I just got worn out from watching the contractor take care of it for 6 years. All they were doing was mulching and occasionally going out to weed. They put way too much wood mulch around it because that's what they traditionally did. They had a team of people that really didn't know the weeds from the plants. So I asked the owner, the city, can we step in and take care of it? And this is what we pulled out the first spring. Look at all the material that came out of that garden. You can see the allium summer beauty in the back. This was turf grass. There was all kinds of perennial weeds in there, mostly turf grass that we did our best to get rid of. And that's what was allowed to be in there. And it was the contractor's fault in some way, but not the people taking care of it. He should have never agreed that he had the ability to take care of it. He should have looked at that and said, you know what? We don't know what to do here. This isn't the style of gardening we're able to take care of. Maybe contact Roy and see if he knows some people that could do this. But no, it's, yeah, we can do this. Here's a quote, here's a bid, we'll show up. The guys get out of the truck and they pull out all the wrong plants, or they don't understand what the weeds are. So what is stewardship? It's the nurturing and care of the planting from youth to maturity, and on and on and on and on. As long as that planting is existing, it will always need care and love. And that was the beginning of my first question. What's love got to do with it? And love has everything to do with it. This isn't just a financial transaction. You got people here that bought a bunch of new trucks and have some guys they got to pay. And they need to make money so they can pay for their trucks. So we have this financial transaction. They can spread wood, they can weed, put some shrubs in, and they get paid. It's not what it is. It's about love, health, beauty. It's about other insects and creatures that you might not know. I don't know. I'm not an entomologist of nothing. I don't know any ology of things. I'm a dirt gardener. But from what I've seen with the diversity of plants I've grown and put in the ground, there's insect populations everywhere. I put a garden in at Northwind in 2001. I wanted to try some new patterns to see how they did. We moved our stock beds to the west field. The following spring, there were scarlet tanagers there. I don't know how they got there. And I didn't design the garden. Oh, I think I want to track scarlet tanagers. I had no idea they'd show up. None at all. So whatever I put in, I wasn't quite sure what got them there, but it was beautiful. And it was, I think, diversity had something to do with it. What plant choices, I really still can't tell you, but those things happen. And stewardship is going out there being consistent with the care of the plantings you're doing. You see the group of women from the garden club in Fontana. They planted a prairie. They were out there with the Dutch push-pull hose taking care of their prairie, making sure those plants had a good start to go from a young plant to a mature plant, where then they could become more responsible for their own well-being, shading out the soil. And using the Dutch hoe, you don't have to bend over. You can keep your body upright and you just move through the planting. And they did that May till about mid-June, and by that time the plants could smother out the open soil and inhibit weed germination. But the key was awareness of how to do it, have the right tool, enjoy doing it, and then show up consistently through the month of May to mid to late June, and then the plants would take over and provide for their own well-being. So the next image you see, this is going to be our exercise today. And the exercise isn't just me sitting here with my grid paper. I want you to participate with me. So what I have here, and we'll read it together on the screen, it's an action exercise to generate the value of thoughtful perennial plant relationships. Now this might seem a lot. I'm going to read it slowly to you, and then I'll do some work on the grid paper, and then these are things you can do at home. Part of the practice. So what we have is I put together a group of plants that have durable lifestyles in our region. They live well in our average soil, have good structural form and diverse flowering effects, and nice fall interest. Each plant is a clumping plant that respects its space. And that's how we begin. We begin with plants that stay in clumps and respect their space. Some may modestly reseed, but it's that clumping ability not to spread by rhizomes. So when they get into that position, they grow into each other, but they share light resources. And each plant is listed by percentages next to the plant. That refers to how many of each plant is used in relation to the total plants used. That means each plant on here has a certain percentage by it. And that percentage is the number of plants you use based on their growth rate and growth habit in relation to each other, growing into each other. The percentage of each plant is in reference to each plant's growth habit and growth rate. A higher percentage relates to a plant having a mounding habit. A lower percentage is a plant having a vertical habit. The mounding and shorter plants simply interwork between the vertical plants, right? You have mounding and vertical. The mounding goes in between. Before you begin the design exercise, you should research each plant. So don't start this and know nothing about the plants. You can look them up, make a list of characteristics that they each have, their flowering time, bloom time, mature height. And in my book, I also write the height as they grow. So you could say by a certain period, it might be 12 inches tall before it gets 22 inches tall. So just research the plants. And before good planting design, it takes awareness and knowledge, time, patience, and love. Be joyful you're beginning to mingle with a group of people doing something counterculture. When you're doing this is a counterculture practice. Because what people are looking up is when does it bloom, how tall does it get, does it live in certain soil conditions? And we have lists and lists of plants that bloom in June, lists and lists of plants that are 18 to 20 inches tall, 25 inches tall. What about all that in between time? What about when they're not in bloom? When does a plant go from 50% seed flowering to 100% flowering, back to 50%, back to seed heads? These are all cool things to be aware of. So you can't, this is the most important part, I think, to understand. You can't speed this process up. You can't go to Home Depot and buy a planting design computer kit or a computer set. This has to become who you are. You and the plants have to develop and understand your relationships to each other. There's no gas pedal for this. And that's why it's so counterculture. Our culture wants, like, okay, I just watched a 30-second video on baking bread, or where can I go buy a computer program that'll help me get this done? There's no AI involved. It's you involved. And that's the beauty of it. It's driven by the personality and lifestyle of the plants. All we can do is understand them and respond to who they are and how they live. And that's, for 42 years, that's kind of what I've done. And the other thing I've done, and it's not really anything I did, it's just life, is I've met wonderful people who shared all their knowledge with me. All the people I met who were passionate about gardening, about plants, about nature, about environment. Getting to know all those people created partnerships for me. People I could call when I didn't quite know which direction to go. I have so many people I can get in touch with. And so many people call me too. So we have all these partnerships going back and forth. This isn't an individual activity. This is sharing with as many people as you can find who really love what they're doing and discovering all the time how to grow into their own future with plants. So this is just an exercise creating a personal experience for you. This, again, it's an exercise. This doesn't, you don't have to run out and buy hundreds of plants. You don't have to prep soil. It's sitting there with a piece of paper. You scroll up. So what we are striving for is compatibility, early weed control. That's our goal, is early weed control, diversity, and possibility through the years of additional enhancement of the plantings that can continue to add aesthetics and be beneficial for all living beings. And that's kind of what I wrote down as a goal. And again, you can read this and you can reread it and reread it on the YouTube until you feel comfortable with it. And you can reread it and send some questions. As I'll have time to get back to you with some of those questions. But if once mid-April gets here, it's buckle up time. I'm not going to be able to answer. I'll have more of my own questions to answer about what I'm doing without getting back to you. But I think that's why we're doing this now. We can work together on this. This is our personalized team effort together, okay? So here I'm scrolling to the page. So the planting area is 300 square feet. I've already made a change with that with my pad. I'm going to do 200 square feet, but the 200 then will relate to the 300. We can add on to that. So I'm going to get you started with momentum and show you how I'm laying these out. And after you've created and placed each plant in its planting space that you want to put them, ask yourself, what are the immediate stewardship concerns of what I've created? So review it. When you look at where your plants are and how you created the patterns with the plants on this list, ask yourself, what am I going to have to do to care and love this planting? And what's my time frame of doing? Do I have immediate things I need to keep pruning? Do I need to stake anything? And if you don't want to stake it, you can move something in or take something out. And again, this is just an exercise to get you, the plants, into your head of how they relate to each other through the beginning of their early life through time. Long-term care is the most important component of any planting design. Have you created a planting that can be cared for in relation to the caregiver's capability, which we talked about before? So you can see the plants on the list here. I'm going to read over them. I have Stachys officinalis Humilo, 15%. I have Calamintha nepeta, 13%. Salvia wisui, 10%. And those higher percentages means what? It means they're mounding plants. Or mounding as high as they are, wide as they are vertical. Now I get to Coreopsis verticillata golden shower, 7%. Echinacea alba, 8%. Vernonia iron butterfly, 5%. Spiralis heterolepis, 11%. Now a lot of you out there right now are saying, Roy, where's the common names for these plants? How come you don't give me any common names? I'm not going to. Common names are regional. Some of these plants have names you've never heard of for a common name. And when you go to try to buy them, you'll ask for one thing, they're going to sell you another plant. So just come to know, you don't have to say the Latin name properly, that's okay, just say it fast. No one's going to know, because no one speaks Latin anyway, so don't worry about it. So we have Cecillaria autumnalis, 25%. See how fast I'm saying that? Parthenium integrifolium, say it fast, you're okay. At 5%. So that 5%, 8%, 7%, those lower percentages, what does that mean? The plants are more vertical than they are mounding, wide. So the lower percentage is taller than wide, the higher percentages are more mounding. Okay, now we have 300 square feet. Let me show you on this camera what we're doing. So I have 200 square feet. Cut. I need a calculator. What I want to show you now is how you come up with how many plants you need for 300 square feet. And what I've got is 200 square feet. I didn't have a piece of grid paper long enough to put 300 on. So that was my fault. I thought about it this morning, but I forgot all about it when I came here to Simple. But you can interpret the 200 and just add the plants in this list to another 100 square feet. And the most important thing to do, don't get stressed out. It's okay. This is just an exercise to get you to thinking, and it's a way of thinking you can change too. But I've learned for me, this is the best way for me to lay out plants. It's been growth rate and growth habit to see how the plants can grow into each other. And then collect and share light resources. So it's really helped me, I think, and I'm trying to think of another way to do it, and I haven't come up with that yet. I don't know how to put a plant in the ground from a container and just kind of put them in so they relate well to each other without thinking about how they're going to grow into each other. So let's take a look at the grid pad here. So with 200 square feet, and you see it written down, the actual planting area, if I take 10 by 20, I'm not planting the edges here. I'm not putting a plant on the edge. So I'm really planting 9 times 19 square feet, not 10 by 20. So I'll take a calculator. 9 times 19. That equals, I'm actually planting 171 square feet. So I got 171. Again, that's because I'm not planting the edge right here. The plants are going at least 12 to 18 inches into the planting. Let me erase this. Because and I discovered that because I always brought too many plants to the planting site. I would always calculate 200 square feet and ended up with extra plants. I didn't know why. And it was because you don't plant the edge. So we have 171 square feet. Now don't ask me to explain this, but when you divide 171 by 1.56, and that's written on the papers, you can see that, divided by 1.56, that gives you 109 plants I need to plant in 171 square feet on 15-inch centers. That came out of the Midwest ground covers. If you go to Midwest ground covers online, they will explain how to get that 156 for those of you that might want to find out how to get that number. If you want 18-inch centers, you divide it by 2.24. But I'm going to do everything on 15-inch centers. And again, I have it explained here. 15 center, divide the square footage by 1.56. So I need 109 plants, okay, to plant 171 square feet. And on the practice, with 300 square feet, I needed 167 plants to plant the 300 square feet, all of it on 15-inch centers. Okay. So now I'm going to look at my list, and I have the number of plants broken down for 300 square feet. Well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pretend I have 300 square feet, and I'm just not going to plant that till later. I'll lay out the 200 square feet just so we can get momentum going. And if you really want to try this, start with 300, because then my numbers will be right. And that way it'll coordinate with what I've written down. So what I'm going to look at, my higher percentages. I'm going to place the mounding plants to start with. That doesn't mean I'm going to use all of them. I'm going to start with the mounding plants along the edge. So we'll start with Stakey's Umalo. So on 15-inch centers, I'm going to put a triangle, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you know what? I'm looking at this, and I think I want to take it down here I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to pause right there. Then I'm going to look at my other mounding plant, and I'm going to pick Salvia wisui. And you can start with Calamintha, but you do have to start, I'm going to go back just a little bit. You have to write down the characteristics of the plant first. That way you'll know. And why did I start with Stachy's? I started with Stachy's because I envisioned it right away, the spikes of the flowers. I could have started with Calamintha, but in my mind I felt comfortable starting with Stachy's to get the vertical mounding look into it. Okay, so out of the 25, I've already used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've used 9 plants out of the 25. And then I'm going to take Calamintha, and I'm going to put a circle for Calamintha, and I'm going to put 1, 2, 3 here, probably 4. I want it to be a little bigger. Now I'm going to put I'm going over to the Stachy's, and I'm going to put some Calamintha here. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to move up here and put 1, 2, 3. I'm going to check back how many. Oh, I have 22 I can use. Okay, so I've got 4, 7. I've used 10 already, so I'm almost halfway. And I think I'm going to put right in the middle. I'm going to place in the middle. Now you're probably, why did he pick the middle? Why didn't he go to the end? It doesn't matter. Just put them down, because you're going to review your design and take a look at it. It's how you feel, because it's how you relate the plants with them that depends how they grow healthy into each other. So for me, I just had a mood to put these here. Then I can see I step back and look at my relationships. Okay, I got Calamintha drifting through here. Now that I have the Calamintha in, what plays well with Calamintha and some of the more vertical plants? Well, what I like is the Coreopsis golden showers. Now, why would I like golden shower? I like the medium green foliage. I like the narrow texture of the foliage, and then I like the kind of golden yellow, because the golden yellow, when it begins blooming, will bloom nicely with the foliage of the Calamintha, which will be a dark green prior to it blooming in late July, August. So I'm going to take Coreopsis, and I'm going to make a square. I'm put 1 here, and I look at, I only have 12 plants because they are taller and vertical. So I'm going to put 2 here. I'm going to put 2 here, and I think I'm going to put 1, 2, 3 here, and I'm going to put 1, 2 here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, 9. I used 11. So wow, I only have 1 more left out of the numbers for the 300 square feet. So what do? You know what? I'm going to erase 1. And see, I'm doing all this, and it's not costing me a penny. I'm rearranging the planting, and I'm going to say I need 2 to carry into the other 200 square feet. And with the Coreopsis, I'm going to put Echinacea alba. So I'm going to make that a star. I'm going to put 1 here, and I look at how many I have. I have 15 plants. 2 here, 1 here, 2 here, 1 here, and 1 here. So now I've got the Echinacea relating to the Coreopsis, vertical, white, coarse foliage, narrow foliage of the Coreopsis with the Echinacea, the butter yellow, golden yellow with the white flowers. I like that look. And I've got the Stachy's blooming in July here, vertical. And then I've got the Calamintha blooming in mid to late July, and that's going to bloom all the way into October. So I've got the Coreopsis. I've got everything kind of going in a pattern now that I can read. So I'm looking through there gently, taking my time. Okay, what do I got here? Okay, I got the Stewardship, the Calamintha, I got the Coreopsis. Good, I like that so far. I like the way it's going. And what do I have left to work? I have my filler plants, my grasses to work with, the grout. The grasses tie the patterns together for me. So I have Caesaria spiralis, and I still have accent plants left. And what plant haven't I used? I haven't used Salvia wesui. So I need to come up with a mark so I can identify. I'm just going to put S down for Salvia wesui. So I'm going to take some salvias. And you looked them up. They're about this high, beautiful dark purple flowers, spikes of flowers. And you know what? I think I'm going to put it on the other side of the Coreopsis. I don't want to put the spikes with the spikes of the Stewardship. That's too many spikes. So I'm going to put S here. I'll put an S here. And I think 2 there is good. And I'm going to put an S here. And an S here, and maybe 1 here. And I think I'm going to put, I got the Echinacea and the Coreopsis here. I'm going to put an S here and an S here. So I've used 1, 2, 3, 5, I've used 7 of them. So I have 9 left. Wow. That means that other 100 square feet, that gives me options to maybe make a larger, slightly larger grouping. And maybe I can just take the pattern of this salvia and maybe just stretch that out and mix the grasses in between. So I'm creating options for myself with that last 100 square feet. I can change the rhythm of the garden. Isn't that cool? You can change your, and to be honest with you, you can disassemble all these plants and you can keep creating patterns. It's how you interpret them of what the possibilities are they're going to be. And those possibilities get cleaner and clearer as you add the patterns down. And at first it might be, oh gosh, is Andy Mayberry on? And this is not what I want. And that's okay. It is frustrating. And who knows that better than the clarinet player? When he first got his clarinet, he squeaked his way through about 2 years of practice. With that dry reed, if you don't get the reed wet, you're squeaking forever. That's practice, practice, practice. But it's the persistence of who you want to be and moving into your own future. That's the whole joy of all of this. It's who are you going to be moving into your own future. And the plants are waiting patiently to help you figure that out. They're all there saying, let's do this together. So let's move forward. That was a pep talk to all of you that were running into the other room to watch Andy Mayberry. Let's look at the grasses, how we can use them now as filler. We've got somewhat of a good start with our patterns. So let's look at, what do we have the most of? We have a lot of Caesaria. We got 42 of them. So with the Caesaria autumnalis, I'm going to use the letter A. It kind of looks like a triangle, but it'll have the line through it. So I'm going to put Caesarias in here. I'm going to start with Caesaria, and you see how they're weaving through the planting? A. Now I just want to create a river of them going through here. I got 42. But here, you know what? With the salvia, I'm going to change to spiralis. I want that more easy look with the taller flowers in August. So here I'm going to use an H for spiralis, heterolepis. So I'll put H. And how many do I have? I have 19 of them. So I'll put H here, H here. I'll use 4. And when I see, okay, I've got spiralis, I think I want to repeat that. So I might put some here on the edge by the Coreopsis. I'll put an H here, and H here. So I've used 4, I've used 7 of them already. And I have my Caesarias as filler. And what do I have left? I have Humilo, I have Calamintha. Okay, I'm going in a good direction. So over here, I'm gonna put more Caesaria. I'll finish off with Caesaria here. Oops. Make sure you have that eraser. I gotta put some Sesslaria here. Now I have this open corner in this corner, and I have the other 100 square feet yet. So when I'm looking at my pattern, I'm reassessing it. I got, what else? Do I want to take any more stakeys and drift it through here to this corner? Maybe finish it up with a larger group of stakeys. I've used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Cross check here, 8 of them. 4 and 5, used 9 actually. So I think, you know what? I think I want to add another one here, and one here. I want to make that a little bigger group. S, I put a, oh, too big. So I'll put a Sesslaria here, and Sesslaria here. And that's going to move me into the other 100 square feet. And I want to total up those Sesslarias too to see how many I have left to work with in the remainder of the 100 square feet. So let's look at the Coreopsis. I've used 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. I've used 8. And I look at my group. I have 4 left. Okay, I'll save those for over here. So I'm just going to continue Sesslaria, and I think with the Sprablus and this Coreopsis and Echinacea, I'm going to put a salvia here and here. So I have salvia wisui here and here. Cut. So I just caught myself, and this is the beauty of working on it. You know what? A lot of you out there probably caught this before I did. Remember, the A was going to be autumnalis, the S was salvia. Without having the plants written down, so I have a code to follow, I confused the A and the S. I was putting S down as Sesslaria, and actually I was using it earlier when we were talking as salvia. So not to confuse you, I erased the S's. Here's one more here. And what I would recommend is when you use your geometric figures for a plant, you should write them down so you don't do what I just did and get confused. But the confusion is okay, because right here, without causing any harm to anybody, I caught myself and corrected it. So the A is the Sesslaria autumnalis. So let's put that here. I'm going to put that salvia here, and A for Sesslaria here. Then I'm going to take the Sesslaria through here. So I've got a Sesslaria river going through. I've got S for salvia, and you can see I've just got them drifting through like islands in an ocean. And the grout that holds it together is the Sesslaria. And I have Sprablus in the corner and Sprablus in the middle. That's a nice, beautiful arching grass with the upright, slightly open flowers. And I finished that off with the Sesslaria autumnalis. Now what I do is inventory, count up the plants to see what I've used, subtract that from the plants I need to cover the 300 square feet, and then I can see what's left. And then if I like the pattern I have, which I'm pretty comfortable with this planting, what I have left, I can see what pattern can I create with what's left. And from interpreting the numbers, I'm going to have salvia, a slightly high percentage of those, not high, I haven't used quite half of them. I have calamintha, about half, and I have about less than half of the stakey, so I have that for my mounding plant. And I have more Sprablus left. I have about half of the Sesslaria. Now what haven't I used? So I look here, well, what didn't I haven't used any Parthenium, and I haven't used any Vernonia. Okay, so I look back at what I have, and I look at the Coreopsis and the Echinacea. So I would say right here, I'm going to put a parthenium. But then I catch myself. Are you sure, Roy? Because I have Echinacea alba and I have parthenium. They're both white. You know what? I think I'm going to go after using the Vernonia. I want to have the texture of the foliage. And as the Echinacea is done flowering and the Coreopsis are going into seed, they have those rusty seed heads. They're very beautiful with the yellow-green foliage. I'm going to put a V. I haven't used a V yet. I'm going to put a V right there for Vernonia. And how many do I have? I have 8 plants. I think what I'm going to do then, in this corner, I'll put another Vernonia. Right there. And that'll tie into my next 100 square feet. So I use 2 of them. Now, here's the beauty of this program as you're going along. Now, be mindful of this. Say you really didn't, after you get to your 100, you really didn't need 8 Vernonia. You were when you're done with your going into your plant. Boy, I can only see how I can fit 4 of them in. So replace them with another vertical plant that you might be able to use more of. So if the Vernonia is something you only need 4 of, and you need another vertical plant to add to the design, you have 4 extra plants, just add 4 more Echinacea alba if you want. Or if you didn't need the Echinacea alba, you could have needed more Vernonia, you can substitute, take out some of the Echinacea at 15 plants and add some of that to the Vernonia, and you'll have a more mass involved. But that might be a direction you want to go as you're finishing the planting off. And the beauty of it is, as you review this plan, you go back and the possibility is, you know what? I'm thinking over here. It's not costing you anything. It's how you're thinking about reviewing and looking at everything. I want to put some Vernonia right here. Right here, I want to put a V. And I want to add 2 more Spiralis right here. I want a longer wall of Spiralis. It'll be in scale with the Vernonia, and I'm going to put white coneflowers up to the edge. So I'm going to use the Echinaceas right through here. And that way I'll have that supporting the Vernonia. Or I take that out. And I might put in Stachys umlo. Right here, 4 of them. And I have the Stachys umlo drifting through there, vertical against the Vernonia. And I don't really need that much Stachys over there, and I can use more Echinaceas. So you're just playing with the numbers, but you're doing it based on growth rate and growth habit. So it's a beginning. But this is the way I kind of look at planning. But what I love about it is that I can go back and change things as I'm sitting here. And you know what, too? You can't screw up. There's no way you can. The only way you can make a mistake is by not knowing the habit of the plants. I couldn't do this if I didn't look up or know the plant's height, growth rate, and growth habit from youth to maturity. And don't be discouraged if you don't know it. If you give yourself 3 years, maybe 4, and you watch plants in your garden and you see growth rate and growth habit, just seasonal growth rate and growth habit, this becomes just a way of being. And you know what? If you sit back right now with all the plants you've grown in your whole life, you can review how much you do know. That chart I showed you earlier with the plant at 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, just look at a plant in your own backyard. Say you have, Galenia trifoliata, and you've had it in your backyard, or you've been using it in design practices for a number of years. You really enjoy it, the fall color. Ask yourself, how big is that plant in mid-June? Well, it's blooming by mid-June. Wow, okay. So you can see how fast that plant went from maybe 6 to 4 to 3 inches tall sometime in early May, late April, to the fact that it's in bloom and almost 30 inches tall, or 28 inches tall by June. These are the things you already know. But it's by adding that knowledge to all the other plants that you don't know or haven't come to know as well yet. When you do that, and the easiest way to do it is this. Just put these grids together. I mean, the nice thing about this show, you've witnessed me screwing up 4 or 5 times already. And I've been doing this 42 years. I didn't write down the names with the symbols. I needed to do that. I put A instead of S. It's okay. Because every time you do that, you keep moving yourself forward to be more successful within the style of planting. Don't let this be frustrating. You're coming to know yourself. You're coming to know who you are. You're coming to know the plant's growth rate and growth. You're becoming intimate. And it goes back to the beginning of what we started with. What's love got to do with it? That's the question. If you love plants and love designing, you have to appreciate the growth that has to happen within all of us to understand who they are and how these plants have lived on Earth from youth to maturity. And we can create some beautiful combinations. And the combinations can actually be cared for and loved at a very minimal cost with knowledge. So I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for being patient with me as I screwed my way up through some of the S's and the A's and symbols. But I really want to try all of us to get together to go beyond just randomly putting plants in and hoping it all works out. So thanks, and send your questions, and we'll look forward to the next show on enhancing a Mesic prairie. Bye, everybody.